The rain started quietly at first, just a soft drizzle that made the leaves glisten and the roads wet. But by late afternoon, the sky had turned dark and heavy clouds rolled over the town. The wind picked up, rattling windows and bending the trees outside. It was the kind of storm that made people hurry home, lock their doors, and pull their blankets close. For one elderly man living at the edge of town, this storm felt heavier than usual, and he knew it might be a long night. He lived alone in a small, weathered house. It was not much, but it had warmth and memories. The walls were lined with pictures of a life well lived, of family he once had and friends he had lost over the years. His days were simple. He woke up early, tended to his small garden, ran errands in town, and spent quiet evenings reading or listening to old songs on the radio. He was used to the silence and had found comfort in it, but storms like this reminded him that life could still be unpredictable. As he sat in his worn armchair, sipping a cup of tea, he heard the wind whistle through the cracks in the windows. The trees bent under the force of the gusts and the rain hammered down in sheets. He shivered, not just from the cold but from a sense of worry for anyone who might be caught in the storm outside. He thought about the people in town, the travelers passing through, and anyone who might be alone and scared like him. Suddenly there was a faint sound of tires skidding on the wet road. Then another. And then a soft knocking on his door. He rose slowly, his joints stiff from age, and went to see who could be out in this weather. When he opened the door, he saw a small group of people soaked and shivering, looking desperate. Their car had broken down just a few streets away, and they had no place to go. The elderly man looked at their faces, wet and tired, and without thinking, he invited them inside. The inside of his house was modest, but cozy. The fireplace was already lit, casting a warm glow over the room. He handed each of them a blanket and a towel, guiding them to sit down while he made them hot tea. The travelers, a family with 2 children and a young couple, were hesitant at first, unsure if they could trust a stranger. But the kindness in his eyes and the warmth of his home melted their fear. Slowly they relaxed and accepted his help. He went to the kitchen, pulling out a small pot and filling it with water to boil. He had a few ingredients for a simple meal: bread, eggs, and some vegetables, and he started preparing food. He chopped, stirred, and cooked quietly, making sure everyone had something to eat. The smell of cooking filled the room, blending with the scent of rain that drifted in through the slightly open window. The travelers watched him with awe and gratitude, realizing how much effort he was putting into helping strangers. As they ate, the storm raged outside. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by the deep rumble of thunder. The rain came down harder, pounding the roof and flooding the streets. The travelers told their story between bites, explaining how they had been caught in traffic, lost their way, and had no one to call for help. The elderly man listened patiently, nodding and occasionally offering words of encouragement. He shared a few stories from his own life, too, of storms he had weathered and lessons he had learned. The conversation was simple but comforting, a small island of human connection in the middle of a raging storm. After dinner, he brought out more blankets and made sure everyone was warm and dry. The children clung to their parents, eyes wide with both fear and relief. He smiled at them, trying to make them feel safe. He could see the exhaustion on their faces, the weight of the storm and their journey pressing down on them. He quietly prayed that they would find some peace in his home tonight. The night wore on and the storm showed no signs of slowing. He checked the windows, tied down loose shutters, and made sure the fireplace was safe. Every now and then, he would peek into the room where the travelers were resting, making sure they were comfortable. He felt a sense of responsibility, a deep knowing that he had done the right thing by helping them. It was not about recognition or reward. It was about the simple human need to help one another in times of need. As the hours passed, the travelers fell asleep, their bodies finally able to relax. The elderly man sat back in his chair, listening to the rain and the soft breathing of his guests. He felt a strange mix of exhaustion and fulfillment. Helping others had always been part of who he was, even in small ways, and tonight, he realized that even the smallest acts of kindness could have a profound impact. He thought about the storm, how it had brought fear and chaos, but also how it had brought people together. Strangers had become guests, and a quiet, lonely house had become a sanctuary. He reflected on the unpredictability of life and the importance of compassion, of being willing to open one's home and heart when someone is in need. As the storm finally began to ease in the early hours of the morning, the elderly man felt a sense of calm, The rain softened to a gentle drizzle, and the wind no longer threatened the fragile trees. Outside, puddles reflected the first hints of dawn, and the town slowly stirred to life. He knew that this night would stay with him, a reminder of the power of simple human kindness, the warmth of connection, and the courage it took to step forward when others were in trouble. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the quiet, letting himself breathe. There was no fanfare, no grand reward, just the gentle satisfaction of knowing he had made a difference. And in that quiet, small house at the edge of town, a simple truth settled over him. Sometimes, offering shelter to someone in need could change more than just their night. It could leave a mark on the heart forever. The morning light came slowly, filtered through gray clouds that still hung low in the sky. The rain had stopped, but the ground outside was wet and muddy. The elderly man rose early, as he always did, and quietly went to the kitchen to prepare a simple breakfast. He could hear the travelers moving about, stretching and waking after a long, uncomfortable night. He tried not to disturb them, but the smell of hot bread and coffee soon drew them to the kitchen. Everyone gathered around the small wooden table. The children, still sleepy, sat close to their parents, while the young couple helped serve the simple meal. The elderly man watched them with a quiet smile, feeling a warm satisfaction. They were safe, fed, and dry, and that was all that mattered. There was no rush to leave, no demand for anything in return. It was a moment of calm after the storm, a quiet time to rest and recover. As they ate, conversation started slowly. The travelers told small stories of their journey, the traffic they had encountered, and how frightened they were during the storm. The elderly man listened carefully, offering soft words of reassurance. He shared a few of his own experiences with storms over the years, making gentle jokes and telling tales that made the children giggle. There was laughter in the room, light and soft, a gentle contrast to the thunder and rain from the night before. After breakfast, he led them to the living room, offering warm blankets and soft chairs. The children curled up on the couch while the adults sat nearby, still drying off and warming their bodies. The elderly man went to the kitchen again, bringing out a few treats and water. He wanted them to feel completely at ease, knowing that they could stay as long as they needed. There was a quiet kindness in the way he moved around the house, anticipating their needs without being asked. Outside, the world was still recovering from the storm. Fallen branches lay scattered on the wet streets. Puddles reflected the gray sky, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. The elderly man opened a window to let in the fresh morning air, and listened to the distant sounds of cars cautiously moving through the muddy roads. Despite the destruction, there was also a sense of renewal, a quiet beauty in the way the world cleaned itself after a storm. The travelers began to relax more fully. The children played quietly with a small toy they found on the floor, and the adults sipped tea, talking in low voices. The elderly man sat nearby, watching them, feeling a sense of quiet pride. He had offered them shelter without hesitation, simply because it was the right thing to do, and now he could see the immediate comfort and relief it had brought. There was a gentle warmth in knowing that he had helped people feel safe in a frightening situation. As the morning passed, the young couple began helping with small chores. They wiped tables, put away dishes, and offered to help sweep the floor. The elderly man was reluctant at first, insisting it was unnecessary, but their insistence and gratitude softened his heart. There was a shared understanding in those small acts, that kindness was best met with kindness even in the smallest forms. The children became curious about the elderly man's home. They asked questions about the pictures on the walls, the garden outside, and the little trinkets he had collected over the years. He answered them with stories, some funny, some touching, and the children listened with wide-eyed fascination. It was a gentle education in life, showing them how simple moments and acts of care could create lasting memories. While the travelers grew comfortable, the elderly man went outside for a moment to inspect the surroundings. The storm had caused minor damage, scattered leaves and small branches in the yard, but nothing serious. He quietly cleaned the area, making it safe for the children who might step outside. He thought about how fleeting life was, how a single moment could bring fear and disruption, but also the chance for human connection and support. He smiled softly to himself, feeling grateful for the opportunity to help. Back inside, they shared stories of their homes, their jobs, and the lives they had led before being caught in the storm. The elderly man listened intently, asking questions and showing genuine interest. He noticed that these conversations created a sense of unity, a bond that was formed not through shared history, but through shared experience and vulnerability. The room, once quiet and tense, was now filled with warmth and gentle chatter. He decided to prepare a small treat for everyone, taking some bread, butter, and a few fruits he had in the kitchen. The travelers watched him, amazed at how he could take such simple ingredients and make a comforting snack. The children helped in their small ways, washing a few fruits and arranging them on a plate. There was a simple joy in working together, an unspoken connection forming between people who had only just met but shared a stormy night together. Time moved slowly, filled with small, meaningful moments. The elderly man checked on everyone frequently, offering tea, blankets, and reassurance. The travelers started to talk about the road ahead, how they would continue their journey once the streets were safe. They were grateful, but they also felt a sense of sadness about leaving a place where they had found safety and kindness. The elderly man assured them they were welcome any time, a gentle reminder that true hospitality comes from the heart, not obligation. As noon approached, the sky began to clear. Sunlight pierced through the clouds in thin rays, casting soft light over the wet streets and the elderly man's small garden. The travelers stepped outside briefly, stretching their legs and feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces. They noticed the minor damages from the storm and started helping in small ways, picking up fallen leaves and branches. It was a quiet teamwork, a shared understanding of resilience and care. The elderly man watched them, feeling a sense of fulfillment. He realized that the storm, though frightening and destructive, had brought something unexpected: connection, gratitude, and an understanding that even in the smallest gestures, humans could create safety and comfort for one another. It was not about recognition or reward. It was about being present and caring when it was most needed. He led them back inside, offering a final cup of tea before they prepared to leave. They expressed their heartfelt thanks, their words simple but sincere. The children hugged him, leaving tiny handprints on his worn clothes, a tangible memory of their brief time together. The young couple promised to remember his kindness and to share it with others, hoping to spread the warmth they had received in a time of fear and uncertainty. Finally, they prepared to leave, checking their car and making sure the streets were navigable. The elderly man stood at the doorway, waving as they drove off slowly, their figures disappearing into the sunlit streets. He watched until they were gone, feeling a quiet emptiness but also a deep sense of contentment. He had provided shelter, comfort, and care, and that alone was enough. Returning inside, he reflected on the morning, on the storm, and on the simple power of human kindness. He knew that life was unpredictable, but it was moments like these that reminded him of the beauty in helping others, in being willing to open one's home and heart. He felt a calm peace settle over him, a sense that he had made a difference in the lives of people who needed it most. And in that quiet small house, he understood something important: that true generosity comes from empathy and courage, from stepping forward when others are in need, and from believing that even the smallest act of care could create lasting impact. By mid-morning, the storm had fully passed, leaving the town drenched but peaceful. Puddles reflected the soft morning sunlight, and the streets were still quiet as residents emerged to assess the damage. The elderly man stepped outside to inspect his yard, noticing the branches scattered from the heavy winds. He began picking them up slowly, each movement careful, mindful of his age. It was a peaceful task, and he enjoyed the rhythm of it, the sound of dry leaves underfoot and the smell of wet earth. As he worked, he noticed something unusual in the distance. Cars were slowly starting to line up along the main road near his house. At first, it was only a few vehicles, but then more arrived, turning the quiet street into a crowded scene. The elderly man paused, confused. What was happening? Why were so many cars stopping near his home on a normal morning? He wiped his hands on a towel and walked closer to see. People were beginning to emerge from their vehicles, some walking toward his house with smiles and waves. He felt a mix of curiosity and unease. Who were they, and why were they coming here? As he approached the front steps, he saw the travelers from the previous night stepping out of their car. They waved enthusiastically, their faces bright with smiles. The elderly man blinked, unsure what to make of it. The young couple ran up the path holding small packages and flowers. They hugged him warmly, thanking him again for the shelter and kindness he had shown during the storm. Their gratitude seemed larger than the night before, almost celebratory, and he felt his cheeks warm with a mix of pride and embarrassment. He had only done what he thought was right. There was no reason for such attention. Behind them, more people began to approach. Some were neighbors who had heard about the elderly man's act from the travelers, while others were friends and family of the travelers. They had come to express their gratitude, to see the man who had selflessly opened his home to strangers in the middle of a frightening storm. The line of cars continued to grow, blocking the road entirely, and the elderly man's small yard became a gathering place for those who wanted to thank him. The travelers explained how they had spread the word about his kindness. They had called friends and family, shared the story on social media, and even contacted a local news station. The elderly man listened in quiet disbelief, not used to attention or praise. He had always lived a modest life, helping quietly and without expectation. Now it seemed the world had taken notice and he didn't quite know how to respond. People began to bring small gifts, not out of obligation, but as gestures of thanks. Some brought baked goods, others fresh flowers, and a few even handmade crafts. Children handed him drawings and notes expressing gratitude in simple words. The elderly man accepted each gift with a gentle nod and a soft smile, feeling overwhelmed by the generosity in return. He realized that the kindness he had shown had sparked something larger than he had imagined. Neighbors and passers-by stopped to see what was happening. Conversations began to fill the air, people sharing their amazement at the turnout. Some asked the elderly man how he had known to help strangers, and he shrugged, explaining simply that it was the right thing to do. The crowd listened quietly, respecting his humility, understanding that true generosity was often quiet and unassuming. The travelers took a moment to recount the events of the stormy night to the gathered crowd. They described the fear, the cold, and the helplessness they felt when their car broke down. Then they told how the elderly man had welcomed them, offered warmth, food, and comfort without hesitation. Each detail was met with murmurs of admiration, and the elderly man listened, feeling both embarrassed and touched by their words. As the morning moved toward noon, the crowd continued to grow. Some people had come just to witness the man who had inspired so much gratitude. Others brought small acts of kindness in response, helping him clear his yard, sweeping leaves and picking up branches left by the storm. The elderly man watched, his heart swelling with quiet joy. He realized that his small act had created a ripple effect, inspiring others to show kindness in return. The children in the crowd began playing gently in his yard, their laughter blending with the hum of conversations and the occasional honk from the line of cars. The elderly man joined in briefly, tossing a ball and smiling at the simple joy it brought. He watched how the storm, which had caused fear and discomfort, had also created a moment of connection, of community, and of shared humanity. The travelers invited some of their friends to come inside for tea. The elderly man offered what he could, bringing out cups, water, and light snacks. The room, once quiet and modest, now buzzed with conversation and laughter. People shared stories of their own experiences, of times they had been helped or had helped others. There was a gentle energy in the house, a warmth that went beyond the fire in the fireplace. It was the warmth of shared empathy and recognition. The elderly man reflected quietly on the day. He had always believed in helping when needed, but he had never imagined that a single night of shelter could lead to such a response. He saw the kindness in people's eyes, the gratitude on their faces, and the way they supported one another. It reminded him that even the smallest gestures could have a profound impact, creating connections that lasted longer than a stormy night. Some of the visitors offered to help him with minor repairs around the house, noticing the wear and tear that came with age. Others offered assistance with groceries, garden work, or errands. The elderly man felt hesitant but also grateful. He realized that accepting help was also a form of connection, a way to allow others to participate in the kindness he had started. As the afternoon approached, the line of cars slowly began to shrink. People waved goodbye, leaving with smiles, hugs, and promises to return. The travelers were the last to leave, hugging him once more, thanking him for the shelter, the warmth, and the comfort he had provided. The elderly man stood at his doorway, watching the cars disappear down the road, feeling a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and quiet pride. Returning inside, he looked around his modest home. The warmth lingered from the morning, the laughter of children and the conversations of neighbors echoing softly in his memory. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that his small act of generosity had touched so many lives. It was a reminder that kindness, even when simple and quiet, could inspire others and create moments of connection that mattered. He sat in his favorite chair, sipping tea, reflecting on the day. The road outside, once quiet and empty, had been filled with people, gratitude, and the spirit of community. He realized that sometimes life's storms were not only challenges but also opportunities to show humanity, to open doors, and to create bonds that lasted far longer than the night itself. The elderly man felt a calm peace settle over him. He had offered shelter when it was needed most, and in return, he had received the warmth of shared humanity. It was a lesson he would carry with him always, that even in the face of fear and uncertainty, kindness had the power to connect, heal, and inspire. And as he looked out at the now clear streets, he knew that the ripple of that one stormy night would, the day after the storm, the town was alive with whispers about what had happened at the elderly man's house. By mid-morning, cars were lined up along the main road, stretching farther than anyone could have imagined. Neighbors peeked from windows, curious about the gathering, while people who had heard the story from the travelers made their way to see the man who had offered shelter during the storm. There was a sense of excitement and warmth in the air, a feeling that something extraordinary had taken place in their small town. The elderly man stepped outside, unsure what he would find. The sight of so many vehicles and people made his heart race. He had only opened his door to help strangers, never imagining it would lead to such attention. Some people waved as he appeared, smiling broadly and calling out thanks. He felt a flush of embarrassment, unsure how to respond. He waved back politely, muttering soft words of thanks, but inwardly he wondered why so many people were here. The travelers from the stormy night ran up to greet him. They held gifts and flowers, their faces lit with joy. They explained how they had told friends, family, and even local news outlets about the elderly man's selfless act. They spoke about the fear they had felt during the storm, and how his kindness had made them feel safe and cared for. The elderly man listened quietly, his voice barely audible as he thanked them again. He felt overwhelmed but deeply touched. He had only done what he felt was right, and now it seemed the world was celebrating him. More people began to arrive, some walking from nearby houses, others coming from farther away after hearing the story. Children carried drawings and notes expressing thanks in their simple, honest way. Adults brought baked goods, flowers, and small tokens of appreciation. The elderly man accepted each offering with a humble nod, touched by the generosity in return. He had always believed that helping others should be done without expectation, but he could not deny the warmth and connection he felt in that moment. As people gathered, conversations filled the air. Neighbors and visitors shared their astonishment, telling each other how rare it was to see such pure, selfless kindness. They spoke about their own experiences, times when someone had helped them unexpectedly. The elderly man listened, occasionally offering a few words, but mostly he watched with quiet gratitude. He realized that this small act of sheltering strangers had sparked a ripple of goodwill, inspiring others to be kind and compassionate in their own lives. Some visitors stepped forward to help him with small tasks around the house. They swept leaves, picked up fallen branches, and offered to help with minor repairs. The elderly man initially resisted, insisting it was unnecessary, but their persistence and friendly smiles convinced him. It was not just help. It was a way for others to show their appreciation and participate in the spirit of kindness that had started with him. He felt a sense of unity and shared purpose, a warmth that went beyond the physical tasks being done. Children played gently in the yard, laughing and chasing each other. Their parents watched nearby, some helping with cleanup, others sharing conversations. The elderly man joined in briefly, tossing a ball and smiling as he watched the children's joy. It reminded him that the storm, though frightening, had brought unexpected blessings. It had created connections, moments of happiness, and a sense of community that might not have existed otherwise. Inside the house, the elderly man offered tea and light snacks to anyone who wished to come in. The room, once quiet and simple, now buzzed with conversation, laughter, and shared stories. People spoke about their lives, their struggles, and the moments when someone's kindness had made a difference. There was an energy in the house that was gentle but powerful, a reminder that compassion had the ability to create bonds that lasted far beyond a single moment. The travelers took a moment to share the story of the stormy night with the crowd. They described the fear and helplessness they had felt, and then the warmth, safety, and care they had received from the elderly man. Each detail was met with admiration and soft murmurs from the listeners. The elderly man felt a mixture of embarrassment and pride. He had not expected to be recognized in this way, but he appreciated the sincerity in the faces around him. Some visitors offered to help him with small home improvements, noticing the wear and tear of age. Others promised assistance with groceries, garden work, or errands. The elderly man felt hesitant but also grateful. He realized that accepting help was also part of the exchange of kindness, allowing others to participate in giving back and strengthening the bonds formed during the storm. Throughout the day, the elderly man reflected quietly on what had happened. He had acted from a simple desire to help, never seeking reward or recognition. Yet the impact of that one night had reached far beyond his home. It reminded him that small acts of kindness could inspire others, creating a network of goodwill and compassion. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that what he had done mattered in ways he could not have imagined. The crowd began to thin in the late afternoon, people waving goodbye and expressing thanks one last time. The travelers were among the last to leave, offering hugs and heartfelt words of gratitude. The elderly man watched as the cars slowly drove away, leaving his yard quiet once more. He felt a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and a quiet pride. The world had acknowledged his small act of kindness, and it had created ripples of connection that he would carry with him always. Returning inside, he took a moment to look around his modest home. The warmth lingered from the morning, the laughter and conversation echoing softly in his memory. He felt a deep sense of contentment, knowing that he had made a difference. The storm had brought fear and uncertainty, but it had also brought a chance to show humanity, to create bonds and to inspire others. He understood that true kindness was not measured by recognition, but by the impact it had on the lives of others. He sat quietly, sipping tea, reflecting on the events of the day. The road outside, once empty and ordinary, had been filled with people, gratitude, and the spirit of community. He realized that even in the midst of challenges and fear, acts of care and compassion could create lasting memories and inspire others. It was a lesson in empathy, humility, and the quiet power of doing what is right. As evening approached, the elderly man prepared for a calm night. The sun set slowly, casting a soft glow over the town. He thought about the travelers, the neighbors, and the visitors who had come to express their gratitude. Each encounter had left a mark, a reminder that even small gestures could have a profound effect. He felt a sense of peace settle over him, knowing that kindness, given freely and without expectation, had the power to change lives. He looked out at the street one last time, now quiet and empty, and smiled. The storm had passed, the road had been cleared, and the ripple of his small act of kindness had touched many hearts. He understood that this was more than just a memory of a storm. It was a story of humanity, connection, and the enduring power of compassion. And as he closed the door and settled into his chair, he felt grateful for the opportunity to have made a difference, knowing that the warmth he had shared would continue to ripple through the lives of those he had helped, continue far beyond the memory of the rain. The morning after the community had gathered, the elderly man awoke to a quiet house. The events of the previous day replayed in his mind, leaving a mixture of warmth and exhaustion. He slowly moved to the kitchen to make tea, pausing at the window to look at the street outside. To his surprise, the road was blocked once again. This time, it was not just a few cars or neighbors stopping by. Vehicles stretched along the entire street, some honking softly, others parked with families stepping out, curious or thankful. Word of his generosity had traveled further than he had imagined. People approached his house from every direction, friends of the travelers, neighbors who wanted to meet him, and strangers who had heard the story all came to express their gratitude. Some brought food, others flowers, and some simply offered a smile or a handshake. The elderly man felt overwhelmed but welcomed everyone with his gentle smile, offering water and tea. He had never sought recognition for his actions, yet he realized that the impact of a simple act of kindness could touch many lives. Visitors began to share their own experiences. A young mother told him about a time someone had helped her in a difficult situation, and she wanted to pass the kindness forward. An older man explained how small gestures could change lives, inspired by what had happened at his home. The elderly man listened patiently, feeling a deep sense of connection with these strangers. He realized that kindness had a way of creating a chain reaction, spreading from one person to many, crossing boundaries and bringing people together. Children played in his yard while adults talked quietly in small groups. The laughter of the children mixed with the hum of conversations, creating a warm, comforting atmosphere. The elderly man joined them occasionally, helping to organize simple games or tossing a ball back and forth. He noticed how the storm, which had brought fear and anxiety, had also created moments of joy, connection, and shared experience. He understood that these simple moments were the essence of community, the quiet power of human empathy. As the day progressed, some visitors offered practical help. They tidied his garden, cleaned the yard, and repaired small damages caused by the storm. Others promised assistance with groceries, errands, or small home projects. The elderly man initially hesitated, feeling a sense of pride and independence, but the sincerity of their offers and the kindness in their eyes convinced him. Accepting help was another form of connection, another way to participate in the cycle of generosity that had begun with him. The travelers returned later in the morning, bringing with them friends and family who wanted to meet the man who had made such a difference in their lives. They shared stories of their journey after leaving his house, how they had spoken of him to others, and how the story had inspired them to act kindly in their own lives. The elderly man listened, humbled, realizing that his small action had grown far beyond what he could have imagined. Throughout the day, people continued to arrive, offering words of thanks, small gifts, and heartfelt expressions of appreciation. The elderly man moved among them quietly, distributing tea and simple snacks, listening and sharing smiles. He felt the warmth of community surround him, a feeling that filled his heart with a gentle pride and quiet joy. He reflected on the storm, how frightening it had been, and how it had led to this extraordinary display of human connection and gratitude. He thought about his own life, quiet and modest, and how small acts of care could have a significant impact. The travelers had been strangers, yet a single night of shelter had created lasting bonds. Now friends, neighbors, and even strangers had come together, united by a shared appreciation for compassion. It was a powerful lesson in the ripple effect of kindness, how one action could inspire countless others to act in ways that brought comfort and joy. As afternoon approached, the crowd began to thin, leaving small groups scattered around the yard and porch. The elderly man noticed how each person took something away from the experience, a reminder to help others, a sense of hope, or a feeling of connection. Even though the street had been crowded for hours, the interactions were meaningful, personal, and heartwarming. He realized that the storm had not just tested courage and resilience, but had also reminded people of the importance of empathy and generosity. He sat quietly in his favorite chair, sipping tea and watching the last visitors leave. The road outside was clear again, and the house was peaceful. He thought about the travelers, the neighbors, and the strangers who had come to share their gratitude. Each person had contributed to a tapestry of kindness that would remain in their memories and in his own heart. He felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that his simple act had created a wave of goodwill. Later in the evening, he walked to his small garden, tending to the plants and enjoying the quiet after a long day. The sun cast a warm, golden light over the wet ground, reflecting the calm that had returned after the storm and the excitement of the day. He reflected on how quickly life could change, how fear and uncertainty could be met with courage and compassion, and how the smallest gestures could leave lasting impressions. He thought about the travelers, now on their way, carrying the story of his kindness with them. He hoped they would continue to act with compassion and to spread the warmth they had received. He also reflected on the community, how neighbors had come together, how children had learned from the example, and how gratitude had filled the air. He realized that true impact was measured not by recognition, but by the way it touched lives and inspired others. As night fell, he returned to the living room, quiet and filled with memories of the day. He sat in his chair, feeling the calm and satisfaction of knowing he had made a difference. The storm had passed, but its effects were still felt, in the hearts of the travelers, in the community, and in his own sense of purpose. He understood that life's challenges often presented opportunities for kindness, and that even small actions could grow into something extraordinary. He closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about the road outside, the laughter, the gratitude, and the shared moments. The memory of the stormy night, once frightening, had transformed into a story of hope and human connection. He felt grateful for the chance to help, to witness the ripple effect of compassion, and to know that kindness could leave a mark far beyond the immediate moment. The elderly man finally settled into a gentle sleep, comforted by the knowledge that his actions had inspired others and brought warmth to those who needed it most. The road outside remained quiet, a small reminder that life returned to normal, but the impact of his generosity would continue to resonate. The story of one storm, one act of shelter, and the community's response became a quiet legend, a reminder that human kindness, when given freely, could create lasting change and touch lives in ways that were both simple and extraordinary.